morning, 11 Warriors. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast. I'm your host, George Eisner, and with me is our beloved beat correspondent, Andy Anders, who was busy with hotel check-in yesterday for the Buckeye football team. Andy, how you doing today?
Doing great, George. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm happy to see that we got number one and number two for the season opener for Ohio State and Texas with the release of the coaches poll. I'm just kind of curious what your reaction to that was. If that was within your expectations, what's your initial just response when you saw that poll come out?
Yeah, I certainly thought it was possible that Ohio State and Texas could end up as the number one and number two teams in the poll. Ohio State, obviously defending national champions, and while you have so much attrition from last year's roster, as we've talked about at length this offseason, as we'll continue to talk about here in the run up to the season, there's still a lot of talent coming back, namely Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. And when it comes to Texas, they've been one of the most talented teams here in college football recently. They're the defending SEC champions, which is going to carry a lot of weight. And of course, there's a ton of hype around Arch Manning. That's going to loft up some of these things, even in a coach's poll, where maybe these things are evaluated more objectively by coaches than, maybe certain media members have biases. We'll see if the number one versus number two thing holds up in the AP or not. But Texas, like Ohio State, I think it's interesting, is also losing a lot of production from last year. And when you dive into the numbers there, it kind of reflects that. However, again, the hype around Arch Manning, they still have plenty of talent coming back. Holland Simmons defensively, some of those pieces. It just adds to the anticipation of this matchup now. It's the first ever season opener between the number one and number two teams in the coaches poll. And it's a game that I'm really excited to be there at. However, I will say I am very disappointed that it is a noon game. And I know that's been a frustration all offseason with Ohio State fans, the fan base, and just not getting that prime time game. Fox is very much leaning into biggest season opener of all time. And I think if you look at the comments on Twitter, and it was my first reaction too, it's like biggest season opener of all time, and it's not a primetime game. So I think that part of it does, I think, put a little damper on things, but not too big of one because this is going to be an incredible, iconic season opening matchup between two brands who just met in the college football playoff. And of course, there will be all those motivations from the Texas side to try and get some revenge on Ohio State. So we'll see how it plays out.
Kickoff time notwithstanding, because I think you touch on what is a very true sentiment for a lot of this fan base, myself included, that this really should be a primetime night game as opposed to a coveted big noon kickoff. Do you agree with the way that Fox is trying to market this, and assuming that the AP poll does end up congruent with the coaches poll, that this is a number one, number two matchup? Would you agree that this is the biggest season opener of all time in college football?
I try. I mean, in general, as a journalist, sometimes you try to avoid speaking in absolutes, but I'm not afraid to here because it is the first ever season opener between the number one and number two teams in the country. And you're talking about the defending national champions facing off with a team who was going on a deep run and had it spoiled by said defending national champion. So to me, I think Fox is very wise to brand it that way. And I think it is, you definitely have the backing of it being the first time this has happened to say, yeah, it certainly has an argument to be the biggest season opening game ever played between two teams. And again, the brands that are clashing, I mean, it's hard to get bigger in college football, just names and that aura than Ohio State and Texas. Like, you just talk about biggest brands in the sport, those are two of the top five, easy. So for all those stakes, you throw in the debut of Arch Manning, you throw in a Heisman frontrunner like Jeremiah Smith. There's a lot that can make this the biggest season opening matchup of all time. And if I'm Fox, I'm definitely going to lean into that and try and draw all the viewership, all the eyeballs I can to say that it is that, regardless, again, putting aside the new kickoff time and the discussion around that we've had. So I think it's a very smart move by Fox to immediately lean into that. And, numbers don't lie. The numbers say it's the first time this has ever happened. I'm okay. I don't have any objection to them saying that.
with Texas coming in at number one and Ohio State at number two, I guess regardless of where they ended up in the poll, was your expectation that Texas would be ranked ahead of Ohio State, or does it surprise you to see the Longhorns ahead of the Buckeyes in this first iteration of the rankings to come out this offseason?
I I frankly don't know what for me it's hard to predict where pollsters are going to end up, be it the coaches, be it the media. I think it's a little unfair because of what I said earlier about like both these teams lost a lot of production from last year. Texas and Ohio State lost a comparably big amount of production. However, you have the Arch Manning hype. Arch Manning's been waiting. Arch Manning has had very small flashes, but he's like, this is his time to shine now. Everyone's expecting him to be the next great thing at quarterback in college football. And so I think that hype is going to boost up Texas a lot. And they have, like Ohio State, they still have a great roster coming back. They've recruited very well. They filled out some spots in the transfer portal, especially on the defensive line. They've done some things to touch up those areas of worry for them heading into the season. And I mean, they did have a decent game plan against Ohio State when they met in the college football playoff. I mean, this was the team that took Ohio State the closest to defeat throughout its playoff run. Not in the final score line, obviously. Notre Dame only lost by 8, but Notre Dame, I mean, it was like they were trying to do last minute comeback down huge in the fourth quarter, and they needed a whole lot more to break their way before they were going to win that game. Texas was, right there, first and goal at the 1, could have tied it in the final couple of minutes. And they had Jeremiah Smith had 1 catch for 3 yards in that game. They came out with an incredible scheme in their zone defense to shade it to him, to do everything they could to say that guy's not beating us. Now it's going to be harder for them to do this year because they lost multiple defensive backs to the NFL draft, pretty highly in the NFL draft, namely Jahdae Barron, who won the Thorpe Award last year, right, and was at corner and was able to do some things to help mitigate Jeremiah in those spaces. That matchup of how Julian Sand performs on his first night or Lincoln Keenholz performs on his first night, that quarterback competition still not decided. But new Ohio State quarterback against a Texas secondary with a lot of new pieces and finding that chemistry with Jeremiah Smith, with Carnell Tate, with Brandon Ness is going to be a big storyline entering that game. And also, you can talk about SEC over Big Ten bias. Is it still a thing after the Big Ten has won back-to-back national titles? And neither of those national titles were even games the SEC was in. Who's to say? I don't know. But Texas, as the defending SEC champion, with all that hype around Arch Manning, I'm not surprised to see them ranked ahead of Ohio State. I frankly wouldn't put either of them number one if I were personally ranking them. I would actually have Penn State there, and I know that might be a big red flag to some Ohio State fans listening to this, but I'm pretty high on Penn State this year
No,
under
you're just
Dan.
being a very objective journalist, Andy, you
Right.
know.
Yes, I think they're. I'm trying to put my biases aside and just that's my honest assessment of things. I would say Penn State to me on paper has the best roster in college football this year when you just look position by position. Potentially Ohio State, a lot of talent. I think there's arguments for each of those 3 teams, even Georgia, even some other schools to be number one when you have so much attrition from the defending national champion like Ohio State has had. But again, the talent is still there for Ohio State to be the best team in the country this year. And you're seeing, I don't have any problem with them being ranked number 1, number 2, any problem with Texas being ahead of Ohio State. It's not how I personally would do it, though. I would have Ohio State ahead of Texas just based off the fact they played. Several months ago, Ohio State won the game. They had similar amounts of roster attrition in the offseason, both losing a lot of guys to the NFL draft and such. So to me, I'm not surprised to see it, but it's not how I would personally have it.
So, last question then. You did reference the AP earlier in this discussion, and you given your acknowledgement of the fact that you think Penn State could be potentially ranked ahead of both of these teams. How likely do you think it is that the AP follows suit and acknowledges Ohio State as number 1, number 2? Because those are ultimately the rankings that the media is going to defer to in terms of where this game is positioned when that poll comes out, probably in about a week and a half or 2 weeks from now. Do you think that they're going to follow suit with the coaches poll, or will the Brett McMurphys of the world that think Ohio State should be ranked 6th overall, do you think they're going to knock Ohio State and potentially even Texas down a few pegs from that number 1, number 2 spot?
The thing about, again, for me, I think it's so wide open this year. I think it could go any number of paths, and there's not as clear a number one team entering the 2025 season as there have been in other years past. So I could definitely see it going in a different direction, but I could also see it mimicking the coaches' poll. The coaches in AP tend to be pretty close in terms of their rankings, have been throughout the years, and maybe the AP voters look at what some of the coaches did. I don't know. It's an interesting discussion there as to how the media bias will play out, because, like you said, there's going to be. I will not be shocked to see some reporters that have Ohio State outside of the top five that have a vote in the AP poll, like you said, the Brett McMurphys of the world or whoever. But I wouldn't be surprised if Texas is that way, or Penn State is that way, or any number of other teams, because the AP poll, and when you're incorporating these different media personalities with different viewpoints on the sport, and you'd like to see everyone remain objective, but it's not typically the case. You're going to see some wild ballots in there. But I wouldn't be shocked to see them be number one and number two in the AP, as well as the coaches poll. And if nothing else, because I do think there's, us writers, we love narratives, we love storylines. Number one versus number two to open the season is fun. There's a legitimate argument to rank them in the top two, number one or number two, Ohio State, Texas, based on what they have coming back, even after all that attrition I mentioned. So I could see it happening, but again, won't be surprised if it doesn't.
And I have very fond memories of the last time Ohio State Texas played a number one, number two regular season game. So I certainly hope that lightning strikes twice in that regard in favor of Ohio State. But we're about 4 weeks out from the season opener, so it'll be interesting to see as we come down the pike here in the college football offseason if the AP does follow suit and we get that number one, number two matchup. But only time will tell. Until then, Andy, thank you very much for joining me. And yeah, we'll be back with the Daily Dubcast tomorrow, another edition. So thank you for tuning in. Take care, folks.